For our next portrait project, we are going to do a different kind of underpainting known as an undertones underpainting. Now this process also uses glazes. Remember, a glaze is a thin, transparent layer of paint that you build one on top of each other to modify colors in a painting. Now in our last painting, we had the black and white underpainting that we glazed the colors over top. And many of you may notice it has sort of a dullish tone overall, right? And what's happening when you have that black and white underneath is some of that black is actually reflecting through the colors over top. So it's almost deadening them a little bit. Now, as you can imagine in a portrait, that deadening effect isn't always the best. So for these glazing processes, we're thinking about what that underpainting is going to be, and we want to choose a different color other than black and white that's going to help that vibrant color show through. Now, you have to be a little bit imaginative when thinking about what color to use underneath. You can kind of think about looking at your skin, for example. And if you're looking at that skin tone, if there was a core color that you could pull out that you would put underneath, that's the color that you're going to choose for your underpainting. Now, it's interesting. It's one of those things you can't really go wrong, right? For example, you see a few examples here where the artist has chosen a hot pink or a green or a purple. Each one is going to make the finished piece look just a little bit different, and it's going to kind of overall inform the color of your skin. And I would have you think about this, in a way that if you say you're looking at the underside of your arm or in the shadow, that you can kind of pick out an overriding color that you might use to do a tonal version of your piece. Oftentimes, it helps people to think about the idea of like summer and fall skin tones. Sometimes this used to be a thing when they would tell women to pick out makeup. They would think about what their tone would be. You can think about it like that. You can look at your photograph and try to imagine what you see as the overarching tone. Although sometimes in photographs, the way it's printed will give it kind of an orangish look or a greenish look that might not be true to the actual skin tone. If you are familiar with the person that you're painting, you can actually just go look at their skin and imagine what you think that color might be. So when you go to start with the painting, you're first going to map out your underdrawing, mapping out those general areas of value. Like before, we're really just focusing on mapping out the overall value tones of the piece to start. So having those mapped out in your underdrawing is important. When we go to start painting, it's not a bad idea to work from the background to the foreground, especially with portraits. When you have, say, small little tiny details like hair, it's nice when they actually sit over top of the background. So you can think about what color your background's going to take on too as you start to build the piece. Now remember, the undertones are meant to be sort of a vibrant, unrealistic skin color that sits under the skin. That color that we put underneath is actually going to show through in our upper glazing layers. So you're not going to see these colors at the end. You might see a peep here and there of the undertone, but it's going to be completely covered. So feel free to go bright, blues, reds, greens, purples, oranges, all those make great undertones. I know whenever I do a self-portrait of myself, I have very pink or red undertones that pop out. when I do a painting of my daughter, she has sort of greener undertones that I would tend to use a green undertone for her. The key is do not use black at all. Try to avoid it even when you're making your shadows. Mix a nice dark blue. As you can see in the example here, I've mixed sort of a dark purple for that shadow color without using black, like mixing an alizarin, crimson, and a phthalo blue to get a nice dark color. Black is really going to deaden those colors, so we're going to try to find other ways to make dark colors without using black. Try to avoid black anywhere on the skin. You want to make your darks by mixing colors. You might get something that will look like a black, but don't use the black straight out of the tube. So the first glazing layer, you already see we start to get closer to an actual skin tone. Everything's kind of gotten a little bit brighter. And then we'll do a final layer where we add more details. So kind of like the similar ones, we're not doing it all at once. We're starting with the underpainting, we're doing a glaze layer, and then we're doing a detail layer. So let me start. I got a sped up video here. So remember, as you're working, you want to focus on the value. It helps sometimes to just print off or change your image to completely black and white. That way you can just focus on value on this first layer. Especially once you have your undertone picked, it helps if you kind of leave out some information so you can just focus on filling in just the overall value, the play of light and dark. If you're in oil, you're going to use Gamsol in this first layer to add fluidity. If you're in acrylic painting, I would suggest using your 2-part slow dry medium because you're going to have to do a lot of blending and it'll actually help you on this first layer. Remember, have fun with the color. Using those bright sort of out there colors will help inform and make your other layers more vibrant. You want to make the underpainting accurate, but don't fuss over details. We're going to really actually go into all those smaller details in the upper layers, and the glazing is going to be a little bit more opaque. As you're going, you can decide what you want to do with the background or what you want to do with the hair or the closing. You can also choose some fun, bright underpaintings that are going to show through in those upper layers. For example, with the hair, you can kind of think about it the same way. You can have a tone or an undertone. Think about in the hair, not drawing in a whole bunch of individual hairs. Try to look at the hair in sections, like if you can pull out a highlight and a shadow and just try to fill in those two colors initially in the underpainting. And then the upper layers will start to add more detail. You'll see that in the video that we will do next week.